I think someone was in my house. This took place a couple of years ago in Hollywood, Florida. I was in the middle of school at the time. Myself, my sister, and my mom were both on our front porch unlocking the door after coming home from school. We noticed something was off right away because our alarm didn't go off, and my mom always made it a point to set the alarm before we leave the house. Although that was weird and we all noticed and commented about it, it was very possible that we just forgot to set it. Because of that possibility, we just ignored it and moved on. As we entered the house and were beginning to set our backpacks and other stuff down, I heard a drawer close in my bedroom. I thought I was just hearing things, so I just looked at my mom and was about to ask her if she heard something. My mom looked at me at the same time, and her look of horror was enough for me to realize that she had heard the same thing. My sister didn't seem to notice because she had earphones in. That sound and the fact that the alarm was off was enough for my mom to decide to get us out of there. She loudly said, "I want to show you guys something in the backyard," because she didn't want anyone in the house to know that we had heard them, and that's why we were leaving the house. My sister looked confused, but I knew exactly why my mom said this. As we entered the backyard and shut the door behind us, we speed walked towards the alley behind our house. The only thing that separated us from it was a wooden fence. Once we reached the fence, we opened the gate and began to exit into the alley. I was the last to exit through the gate, and before I could shut the gate, I looked at the house one last time. To my horror, I saw someone looking at me through our curtains. We called the police, and they found no one, and nothing was stolen. I never told anyone about what I saw. I'm a truck driver, and this happened to me in 2017 on one of my routes. I had stopped at a Love's gas station in Emerson, Georgia, maybe 20 minutes outside of Atlanta. I had been stopped for about an hour just resting and eating some fast food when a woman came knocking on my door. I opened it and she looked homeless and pretty old, like maybe in her 50s or even 60s. I asked her if I could help her, and she was like, "I think we can help each other." And I said, "How so?" And she proceeds to proposition me, paying her for sex, which I declined and sent her on her way. I continued to rest and eat and play on my phone for another 30 minutes when someone comes to my door and tries to open it and attempts to rob me in a scream mask. It was obviously the old lady from before. I push her away and lock my door and crank it up. I assume she ran off somewhere because I could no longer see her. After the truck was ready, I started to pull off and started driving. Soon cars next to me started trying to get my attention and honking at me and pointing to the back of my truck. I pull over, and when I came to a stop, I see someone jump and start running. It was that same lady. This crazy woman was holding on to the back of my truck the whole time that I was driving. It was just a really odd experience. When I was 12, I went camping with my mom, my brother, and some of my family friends. This happened at the same remote place every summer, and we always used the same campsites. This wasn't campers or anything like that. We actually set up tents and cooked food at a fire pit. This one particular night, all the kids decided to share a tent to sleep in, while all the parents hung out in a connected campsite that we were also renting. We were just being idiots, nothing more or less than expected for a bunch of preteens that were left alone. This one kid randomly says that he hears something nearby. We were all quiet for a minute, but we hear nothing. So we decided to ignore this whole thing, but soon we all heard it very close to us. We all quietly crept out of the tent, one at a time, each holding a flashlight. We looked around but still saw nothing, and we heard the noise a few more times. But when anybody would go to look, there was nothing. At one point, I could have sworn I saw something small and shiny out of the corner of my eye before it disappeared. After a while, we went back to the tent, all feeling this strange uneasiness, as if we all felt like we were being watched or something. Nobody slept and we kept sticks nearby. But that is not the end of the story though. The next day, we were leaving, so everyone was helping to pack up. My mom couldn't find this glass jar that she had brought to keep my family's toothbrushes in. Nobody could find it anywhere. It was a bit annoying, but nobody really cared. As all the kids were going to pack up the tent that we had used the previous night, the guy in front of me stopped cold in his tracks. I was a little annoyed at first and shoved him aside to get there faster. I immediately saw why he stopped though. Two things were hanging from a tree right near that campsite. One was the skin of a squirrel, cleanly removed in one piece. The other was my mother's jar, filled with its insides. We all sprinted back to our parents. One kid threw up. All of us were traumatized though. We packed up as fast as we could and we never went back. 2 years ago, my mother and I were home alone for a few days because my father and my brother were traveling together. It was a Friday and I got home from work around 1 p.m. My mother came home at about 5 p.m., opened my bedroom door and said hello to me. We had dinner together and then we each went to our individual rooms. Her room was right next to mine. As it was a Saturday, I ended up sleeping in until noon and my mother had already left the house by the time that I had woke up. As soon as I opened the bedroom door, something on the floor caught my eye. There were 3 scratches on the floor, one coming out of my room, right in line with my door frame, and another 2 going down the hall and heading towards my mother's room. They looked like scratches from shoes. I thought it was strange, because looking at the scratch coming from my room, the door had to be open enough to pass over the threshold, and that had to have happened while I was sleeping, which also made no sense. The order of the scratches didn't make sense either, because it looked like the person had left my mother's room, gone down the hall and turned abruptly into my room, or the other way around. The scratches were long, the kind that sports shoes would make, and the chances my mother had shoes on indoors were 0. Shoes were banned indoors. When my mother arrived while I was having lunch, I asked what those scratches on the hallway floor were. She turned irritated and questioned, "What do you mean, what are they? You made them, didn't you?" The burger felt like sand in my mouth. I said no, that I thought it was her. We both got up at the same time and walked out into the hallway and stared at the scratches. And then she said something that made me freak out. "By the way, I didn't clean it because I had already cleaned up the mud that you brought into the house. I got irritated and thought I'd at least leave this here for you to clean up." I almost fell backwards. "Mud?" I asked. She gave me a nervous smile and said that there were small concentrations of mud in small places on the porch, that she found them this morning on the porch, in the living room, and in the hallway too. I hadn't even been on the porch that day. A shiver went through my whole body because I knew someone had entered our house. And the worst thing was that they had opened my bedroom door and watched me sleep. I have a lot of distance from the situation now, so I finally felt comfortable posting about it. When I lived in Boulder, Colorado, I was living in a motel-style off-campus apartment building. It was mostly students living there, and I was on the first floor. There was a large window right above my head. There were many signs that the stalker was watching me for months before I fully realized the situation that I was in. It started with a few stolen packages here and there, a disposable camera that was stolen from my car, a random movie poster left in my car that absolutely none of my friends had ever seen before, and most notably, a man in a bright orange hoodie with his hood up walking back and forth past my living room window about 20 times in one day. I was on the phone with my boyfriend when I noticed him at first, and I made a comment to him about it, but I figured I was overreacting. 2 months after I noticed him for the first time, my boyfriend was out of town with his family on a trip, so I was watching his dog for him. I woke up earlier than normal to go walk her, around 6 a.m. Afterwards, I laid in bed on my phone. At one point, around 6:30 a.m., I looked up from my phone and the same man in the same bright orange hoodie was standing over my bed, looking at me through the window. We were basically a foot apart, the wall and the window being the only thing in between us. I was frozen in shock and he did not leave. He continued to stare at me for about 30 seconds and then walked away. I immediately hid underneath my bed and called the police. I put 2 and 2 together and realized that all these coincidences probably were not coincidences, and he may have been coming by and watching me sleep every morning and possibly night for months now. This was the first time that I acknowledged him, and he seemed excited about it. The police told me to close all of my blinds and to get a camera. Thanks for the help. They said this was common in Boulder, considering both the high student and homeless population. The man didn't look homeless though. He also didn't fit the description of anyone who lived in my building. The police officers had checked with my building manager, so that meant that he was coming from somewhere else specifically just to watch me sleep. I did as I was told and closed all of my blinds. However, about 2 hours after the police officers left, he came back and banged on my window and tried to open my door, which always automatically locked. I was absolutely terrified, called the police again, and left town to go be with my boyfriend and his family for the next few days. When I got back, I never planned to stay at my apartment alone at night, but I figured I could unpack my things, as it had been a few days and he probably noticed that I was gone. Within the hour of me being back, he was back, and this time he held up a camera through the one crack in my blinds that I had, and then he held up a knife behind the camera, slowly walking by and making sure that I saw it. I saw alright. I called the police for a third and final time. They made an official police report and I moved out of my apartment within the week. I never saw him again though, but from time to time I did check my old apartment's reviews on Google, because they tried to charge me $1,800 to leave while knowing about the situation, which I thought was insane. Colorado laws protect stalking victims from these fees though. Anyway, I checked recently considering what the Idaho killer had been up to and how much it reminded me of my own situation. I saw a review about a man chasing girls around with a knife in the building doing nothing about it. It was from a parent and I reached out to her personally on Facebook. The same man in the bright orange hoodie attacked her daughter in the parking lot at 4 a.m. with a knife. He tried to stab her as she was getting in her car, but ended up stabbing her car when he failed to do so. And he tried to slash her tires as she started it trying to escape. The thing is he's still out there too.